Okay, everyone. Welcome to our Humanitarian WASH Research Update webinar, AI and Humanitarian WASH. We're really happy you're here. My name's Danielle Lantane. I'm with Tufts University, and we have a fantastic lineup of speakers today. Alice Lung from RTX BBN, Saeed Imran Ali from York, Olivier Mills from Baobab Tech, Aliochis Lagnak from COST, and Nicole Weber at ProWash Scale. Captions are available in French and Spanish. You can set your caption language. And this work is funded by a grant from the Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance, USAID. We'll be talking today about the use of AI in humanitarian research, humanitarian WASH research and practice. So this is part of a Tufts Research to Action project where we're working on a resource center on the GWC website, a research help desk providing help on everything from designing studies to analyzing data, doing this research webinar series, and helping train institutions in LMIC on conducting research in humanitarian context. We're thrilled to have speakers on current AI in research today. I'm going to start this with launching a 2-question poll for everyone to fill out. It is launched. If people could quickly answer these 2 questions. How confident are you in the responses that AI generates? And how confident are you in AI generated content? And so if everybody could answer this, I see about wow, I see about 30 responses already. Fantastic. Thanks so much. We'll give about 30 seconds to do this poll. Okay. Got about 40 responses, 65 participants. Give it just a second more. Okay, I'm going to end the poll at this time, and I'm going to share the results. And so you should be able to see the results. You can see that most people are moderately confident with the uh, uh, with kind of the responses AI generates, with some not at all, a few vary, and then AI generated content is slightly different, with less people moderately confident, some slightly. And so thank you so much for answering those questions. I'm going to stop my share, and then I'm going to hand it over. I'm going to hand this over to the first speaker, Alice Long, who's going to speak about AI in general. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Danielle. I'm super excited to kick things off and give a super quick overview of AI from, I'd say, a computer science or AI researcher point of view. Back in 1990, before some of you were probably born, what do people even mean when they're saying AI? Back then, they were talking about classical AI, which sometimes people say is symbolic AI, good old-fashioned AI. That was back in the days where you could understand what AI was doing because it was really a set of rules and logic that were just applied quickly. And when you wanted to know why an AI made a particular decision, you could look and see which rules it was following. Um, some examples of this kind of AI, something like TurboTax that people might have used, or you might have seen automated alerts or alarms on things. You might not have seen belief, desire, intent agents, but that's a kind of old-fashioned classical AI. You might have seen efforts from people to capture all of human common sense in an ontology, in a set of rules, and then you might have understand why this type of AI got stuck, because it was really hard to write down all the rules. By around 2010, people talked about AI, and they were often using words like machine learning, data analytics, big data, neural networks, reinforcement learning. Those were AI methods that really used a lot more data And they didn't have built-in rules. They just looked at the data and used it to do classification. We had some really good optical character recognition built out of this kind of AI. You might have seen things like chess-playing computers or self-driving cars. That was reinforcement learning, where if there was a good simulator or a game environment, the system could just play a lot of games against itself and it would eventually learn how to win. Um, well, that was great, but sometimes you could not understand why the AI was making certain decisions. Brings us to 2024. Now people are talking about generative AI, transformer models, diffusion models, and this uses so much data, extremely large data. I mean, I could run an optical character recognition training thing on my laptop, maybe even on my phone. But when people are making these very large language models, when they're making things like the Chat GPT engine or the engine behind Midjourney, these are not things you can do on your personal computer anymore. It's so much data. It's like practically the whole internet. And that brings us to the concern, which is that as the computers have gotten so much faster, data sets have gotten so much bigger, these data heavy, knowledge light approaches have really taken off. They have produced AI that can be so useful, but so incomprehensible. Maybe you're thinking that you have a problem you'd like to apply some AI to. How do you know what kind of AI? There's all these different kinds. Well, I think that you want to start by thinking about your problem. Um, are you making a lot of separate decisions, or are you making a long sequence of connected decisions? Maybe there's an AI system like a classifier or an optimizer that handles your exact problem already. But if not, you have to think about what kind of data you have, how much data you have, how bad is it if you get a wrong answer of different kinds of mistakes. And then maybe just talk to a few people, talk to a few computer people if you have buddies, and get some tips. Everybody is wondering, where is AI going? Computer science people whose whole professional 100% of their day is tracking AI and making AI, they're wondering where AI is going. The rate of change is so fast now. I feel like we understand some AI capabilities and performance. We do some tests, and then that information is going to be outdated in a month. It is so fast to keep up. If you feel like it's speeding by, it's not just you, it's everywhere. Um, but the trends that I'm seeing in AI, I'm seeing that people are making it easier to use AI if you're not a computer programmer. So you can use AI, you can use machine learning, you can make requests using natural speech, you can ask AI to help you write software or analyze data if you're not a coder yourself. And these human-like capabilities mean that the way we interact with AI, it can be more like a teammate, it can be almost like a coach, it can be almost like a confidant, it can give you a pep talk, it can help you look for mistakes in your logic. But as it's becoming a better fake human, we get really confused because it sometimes still makes really non-human, very inhuman mistakes. And as AI is doing more complicated general purpose things, it is becoming a lot harder for us to double check its work and for us to know if an answer makes sense or is just wrong. I want to touch a little on ethics. We used to say, what can AI never do? What will people always do better than AI? And we'd say things like, oh, well, people can be empathetic, they're creative, they're funny. AI will never do that. We're starting to see AI that functions in a way that people perceive as empathetic, creative, and funny. But there is still something that AI will never do that people do, which is be responsible. Um, computer scientists, and I know a lot of computer scientists, we will not guarantee that AI is not going to mess up. We will not guarantee that AI, when it's working perfectly, isn't going to cause harm. So the user is still on the hook, but we don't have, as users, great tools to know when something is going to go wrong or when it has gone wrong. And so when we talk about how good does the AI have to be before we trust it, before we delegate control, I would say let's listen to our doubts. People aren't stupid. When people have resistance to an AI tool, it's because change introduces new risks. We don't always see the risks right away. And because these new tools and shortcuts really do change people's skill sets, and they change a lot more than we know. So that's what I will tell you about general AI. Thanks.
I wanted to say thank you so much for that introduction, Alice, and I'm going to turn the screen over to Imran, who is going to talk about using AI in research. Thanks, Imran.
Thank you so much, Danielle, and thanks so much for inviting us to participate. I'm from the Humanitarian Water Engineering Lab at the Dalva Institute for Global Health Research at York University, and I'm presenting on behalf of my colleagues James Brown and Michael DeSanti and other members of the Humanitarian Water Engineering Lab. What we try to do at the lab is be a bridge between the humanitarian and academic sectors and work on critical water and health challenges in emergencies with a focus on a field level operational challenges. We don't use AI as an end itself, but we use it when and where it offers a specific utility for modeling challenges that we encounter in our work. So we work in the domain of machine learning that Alice had outlined. Machine learning approaches are specifically useful for WASH researchers as it can help us identify potential associations in data where we don't know what the fundamental governing relationships are. So in our work, we've used ML in three different ways. We use it for predictive modeling, so using ML to learn relationships between input and output data, and then predicting what the output will be based on different input conditions. We use it for association mining, using ML to investigate how variables are related to one another in a data set. And we use it for soft sensing. So using ML to learn relationships between something that's hard to measure and something that's easier to measure, and then estimating that thing that's harder to measure based on data from the easier to measure inputs. I'm going to focus on the first one on predictive modeling because that's where we've done most of our work. But first, let me explain the problem space that we're working in. Now, as WASH people, we know that safe water is essential for protecting public health and well-being in emergencies. And in emergencies, we rely heavily on water chlorination to disinfect pathogens and ensure there's residual protection against pathogenic recontamination. Now, humanitarian responders rely on universal standards for free residual chlorine, including in the Sphere Handbook and MSF guidelines, Oxfam guidelines, and others. And these are specified for the tab stand for the public distribution points. So right here in the middle of this graph you see. The thing is, however, that these universal TAPSTAN FRC targets often fail to protect water up to the point of consumption in people's homes, which can be many, many hours later, because that chlorine protection decays, leaving water vulnerable to pathogenic recontamination. We've seen time and time again that pathogenic recontamination after distribution is linked to outbreaks of waterborne disease in refugee and IDP camps. So we know that the practices we're using aren't working effectively. Now, to make chlorination work in these systems, we have to understand how chlorine decays. We know how to model and manage chlorine decay in pipe networks. There, the physical and chemical relationships are well characterized, and we can use process-based models to understand how FRC decays in these systems. But what happens after the tap has never really been looked at before. Now, post-distribution chlorine decay is tough because it's an open system. It depends on many known and unknown factors related to the environment, water quality, users' behaviors, and other factors. And the relationships between them are not very well known at all, or not known at all. And there's considerable variability about what happens to water after it leaves a tap. People handle it in different ways, and it's stored in different conditions. There's all sorts of variability, especially in refugee camps, which makes this problem even tougher. Now, we took a systematic approach at looking at this problem. We first worked on adapting those classic process-based models from the closed systems of pipe networks, taking an empirical approach to modeling chlorine decay. But after several iterations and some moderate success, we started to look at AI approaches to this problem because it offered specific utility for those kinds of problems in the post-distribution system. Now, to model post-distribution chlorine decay, we started experimenting with artificial neural networks, a kind of machine learning. Conceptually, we can think about a biological neuron as to how these ANNs or artificial neural networks work. A neuron receives inputs, and if they're strong enough, they cause a reaction transmitting an output signal. If many neurons fire together, it triggers a response. In an ANN, it's a collection of these artificial neurons that reproduces behavior to approximate complex, nonlinear, and assumption-free relationships between input data and output data. And the training algorithm is used to adjust weights and biases to minimize a cost function that reflects a desired behavior that we want to emulate in the ANNs. Now, a key advantage of these ANNs with respect to those two challenges with modeling post-distribution chlorine decay is that it first allows us to handle unknown processes. We don't fundamentally need to know how these variables relate to each other in a mathematical, physical, chemical relationship, because the ANN can approximate it in its modeling. We can also integrate other kinds of water quality data that are not included in traditional decay models. So we have relationships governing how concentration changes over time, but we don't know how, for instance, clearly how different chemical parameters might interact with that process. We can now, using ANNs, integrate that data where it's useful, produces a signal for the decay relationship. Now, coming back to the other challenge about variability. So in a refugee camp, in an IDP camp, there's considerable variability about what happens to water after distribution. So this is a problem that we cannot solve deterministically. People are going to be interacting with the water in different kinds of ways. What we've done is taken artificial neural networks and actually built ensembles of them to create a forecasting system. A single ANN will produce a point prediction, but if you take 200 ANNs, you can generate a probability distribution of what the likely outcome is. What that enables us to do is take a probabilistic look at the problem and characterize the risk of having insufficient chlorine and risk to the water at the household. So we're not just using black box ML to do research. We're building tools that can solve a specific problem that classic modeling tools cannot. And then we're embedding those ML tools within a user-friendly interface, an ecosystem of guidance and support, and what we call the safe water optimization tool. This helps bring those abilities of advanced ML to operational decision-making in a user-friendly and field-ready, problem-oriented manner. The SWOT leverages ML to start at the field level and help identify corrective actions for water treatment and water management to reduce the risk, and then works up to cluster coordination levels to provide an overview of water safety risks across response to support early warning and prioritization for things like cholera outbreaks. We're also conducting new research and touches on the soft sensing stuff I mentioned earlier. We're trying to integrate ML methods with quantitative microbial risk assessment methods to model what is the expected health risk associated with different kinds of WASH interventions. So that's some work that we're trying to build out now, led by my PhD student, Michael DeSanti, that we hope to integrate into the safe optimization tool into the future. So thank you very much. If you're interested in learning more, you can check out our website, safeh2o.app. Over to you, Danielle. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that. And just a note to everyone, we're going to do about 35 minutes of presentation and 25 minutes of Q&A. So please write your questions in Q&A. We've done an overview of AI, a bit of talk about AI used in research. And now I'd like to turn it over to Olivier to talk about his work with WASH AI and other projects. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Danielle. So what is WASH AI? Well, WASH AI was born out of the evolution of, I think, since really the release of ChatGPT, I would say 2 years ago, when we started noticing right away that there's going to be a shift between how people consume information, and we see that a lot, right? People are moving away from reading directly the source of the information and using things like Copilot and other tools to read what I call dynamic content, which is like kind of the evolution of AI in the middle, AI doing some work for you, so you don't have to read the whole report or the whole research paper, or you want to read it in a different language, so machine translation kicks in, or you want to extract only parts of those really long World Bank reports. And so with this evolution comes that big risk that Alice pointed out, which is really the idea that, well, you don't really know what's happening in the background. And so from that, we looked at the capabilities of these language models, and we're really working with the large language models, so similar to what you've played with ChatGPT and Copilot. And this is kind of a ladder that we've got in the back of our mind in terms of what's really possible. So anything from just pulling out a fact from a 200-page report, all the way to get into what we call reasoning, which, again, just to remind you, AI doesn't reason, it predicts. And with synthesized base knowledge and doing what an expert, quote unquote, would be doing with the same information. So all of that in mind, we started building a front face to this, which is a really typical chat type bot in some ways, where people can ask WASH specific questions and get an answer, but not just based on the trained knowledge of the model, but based on a larger set of information that is curated around the water and sanitation sector. So on the right, there's a little bit of a preview there of someone asking a question where it's tapping into the WHO guidelines to produce the answer versus the trained information that the model would be using. So WASH AI is not just really the point we're building here is something that is integratable with existing websites, existing organizations' knowledge systems. And so it's not just about the web bot itself. It's really about tapping into existing organizations' knowledge and networks. So there's a suite of services at the bottom there that we've produced. For example, another one is we're recognizing the use of WhatsApp and how prolific it is in the sector, and we can engage with it and have at the back end the same questioning answering system, but then allow people through WhatsApp to ask those questions in their own language, leveraging the advancements of machine learning to immediately translate that on the fly and get a hopefully good enough quality. And we're doing a lot of testing. Everything's still in beta because of the amount of testing we need to do to produce high quality outputs. The one thing that's come out that is super interesting, and I'll tap into this in a minute, but is what we can see what people are asking about, and it really helps us get insight, which is very different with more passive consumption of information, where people are just downloading the PDF. Are they actually reading it? What were they looking for in that PDF? Here we can see the types of questions people are asking and who is actually using the system. This is based on our initial beta users that we have with WASH AI. So to jump right into what it looks like. So, and we can provide access. We are going to go public. We're still in beta. It's been a year, but this field is moving so fast. We're updating the system like every 3 months, or every week really. But so just to give you an example, WASH AI here, and I won't jump in. I'll jump straight to the chats. But we have, for example, working with Alyosha and the Global WASH Cluster. Working with, and I did ask a question, I'm just not going to let you run it, but for example, if you were to ask this questions to Copilot, what indicators, there's no context here, we're pointing it to the Global WASH Cluster's knowledge toolkit, and it's going to answer the question specific to that body of knowledge and information, and including providing references of what to use, and so this makes a huge difference in terms of contextualizing, questioning, answering. We've also got in a new tool we're just about to launch. So for those who are on LinkedIn, we have this newsletter called WASH Pulse, which is an AI-generated newsletter based on updates in the field. We're going to do a self-serve version of this, which will also be available through WhatsApp. But for example, you can ask, for example, news from last week. And I don't know if you saw how fast that shared, but basically it's reading all these updates from websites in the WASH sector, social media, and it's going to be producing some updates about last week. And you can be way more specific. For example, urban focused sanitation updates. You can type whatever you want there. Of course, it breaks during the demo. It's a very classic system. Okay. Again, there it's got a whole bunch of updates, doing some reading, and then producing a summary with links to what's going on there. So we're working on refining the summary and refining what this looks like. But that's kind of a self-serve, and this gets up to date every day. So that's on the Pulse. We are making it focus on different areas too. I know there's a lot of interest in jobs. So because we're aggregating a lot of information, people are interested in jobs, and then also research focus, which I was hoping to get for today, but I didn't get it done. But it would be the same idea where it's really focusing what it's looking at, and that's WASH Pulse. Another area that's exciting is the working with specific, for example, working with EHF, the Emergency Environmental Health Forum. For those who are familiar, we have this knowledge base of all the videos that was done. So, you can filter by cholera. Problem is you might want to find something that's kind of hidden in one of these videos or one of the PDFs or the abstracts. And so what we're doing is we're building out the tool for that. And so I've only got the screenshot for you because we haven't finished it, but that'll be launching in less than a month. And so the idea would be that you're able to ask a question, for example, summarize the presentations that focus on groundwater monitoring. And what we're leveraging is the transcripts of these to be able to pull out the specific videos or the specific presentations or research, and not only presenting a contextualized summary from that present. These are fake. This is a mock-up, but it would present a generated summary that's focusing on your question. So maybe a presentation spoke to part of something, and it will pull that up for you. And so then you can dig in and watch the whole thing or watch the segment there. So those are just some of the integration tools that we have with WASH-AI. If you're interested, go to washai.org and ask me any questions.
Thank you so much, Olivier, for that. And so we've been talking so far about a general overview of AI, AI in research, AI in summarizing information. And now I'd like to turn it over to Alyosha to talk about AI being used day to day by the cluster coordinators. And just a reminder to put your Q&A in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle, and I hope you can see my screen. My name is Alyosha Saraniak. I work with the Global WASH Cluster as Advocacy and Knowledge Management Specialist. Really happy to be here with you. In the 4 minutes I have, I'll try to be short, but just to say that we've been assessing a bit of the practices done at the field level in the 29 countries that the clusters or sectors are currently active or featuring a humanitarian appeal. We've been also talking with coordinators, information managers, and some subnational coordinators to look at the various practices. Here, what I really want to highlight is that most of the people have mentioned that they secretly use AI for admin reports or any guidance that they could have. It's really to look at small chunks of text that can either be summarized, but that they're putting together in a broader document that, of course, they are writing. And pretty much that has been quite the case across the last year, where we've witnessed a lot of usage of AI, also especially at the national level, when the reporting also tasks are quite heavy. We've heard also from them that there was quite a lack of guidance around ethics, and that they were questioning also the use of AI, and that's also something that we're experiencing a lot, which tends to limit sometimes their usage of AI to a very simple task around one paragraph to summarize, and then double checking that and basically doing the rest of the report and writing the rest of the report themselves. Now, maybe if we look more across the humanitarian program cycle, I just wanted to quote a couple of examples that we've encountered. When it comes to basically the assessment phase, as you know, as some of you know, humanitarian response plans usually follow this cycle around, a big proportion of the countries where we have coordination teams and platforms basically run in protracted emergencies and go through this cycle pretty much every year. So in order to produce the humanitarian needs overview and response plan, they usually do a chunk of work around secondary data reviews, reuniting all of the assessments that are done in country around WASH to basically inform their primary data collection process in a collective way. We've seen that secondary data review software such as Deep.io or other simple softwares have been used to basically look at categorizing qualitative information and to inform more of the primary data collection. Which was also a way to express the need for coordinators to be able to spend more time on defining the areas around the multi-sector needs assessment and where that needed to go for the sector and across sectors, of course, and coordinate that in a good way, rather than spending a lot of time around reviewing all of that secondary data. This was a bit of the feedback also we received from some information managers when it came to the calculations, targeting methodologies, and having a common and shared understanding of vulnerability, which for us as a cluster is a key bridge to the humanitarian development and peace nexus. Fortunately, we have ongoing projects such as the WASH insecurity analysis, which we believe also could definitely benefit from AI-assisted knowledge rather than performing the task itself. When it came to strategic planning, Basically, one of the ideas was also to support AI-driven or AI-assisted tools to support project proposals potentially. An example that was given to me recently was basically to look at translating the guidelines from a donor into the local knowledge to basically provide a bit more accessibility to the country-based pool funds that was made available for local actors, but unfortunately not translated in one of the languages of that specific local actor. So very specific tasks that AI have been supporting clusters on the strategic planning phase. And of course, developing strategies and sometimes drafting big documents is also something where cluster coordinators have used the AI function quite extensively. We're looking at protracted crisis where those strategic plans are rolled out every year. It's also one of the disadvantages, I would say, for not having multi-year financing or funding. But basically, this is also a recurrent task that coordinators are involved in. Now, going to reporting and response monitoring, this is probably one of the big tasks where information managers often suffer of a lot of workload that needs to be done at national level. It's about reporting to various stakeholders, including governments, OCHA, other partners, feeding back the information, where basically AI has been able to support them developing automated dashboards, but also to be able to scrape data from various places in other sectors. So also reinforcing some data sharing at various levels in the field. We still see a big gap when it comes to operational gap analysis, being able to link the data to advocacy, the whole uptake process, as well as collective feedback and complaints mechanism, which is probably somewhere where information managers and coordinators would want to spend more time and where the operational work is really seen as meaningful to them, rather than feeding some kind of a machine at national level. We've seen also quite some gaps in terms of lessons learned, but AI being used also when collecting data around performance of the cluster, around post-monitoring, and also where humanitarians had a bit of time to think about the ongoing response, and probably one of the biggest gaps still that we see today. Now, when it comes to preparedness, we've seen that some AI tools have also been used to basically join early warning systems together, but to be able also to look at simple preparedness tools and trend analysis over the years, which is a key also task that clusters have. We've seen that still nowadays, there's still a lack of collective preparedness plans, which is often something that is lacking, but could be something that cluster coordinators could do more if AI was supporting them in some of the more simpler tasks and very process-driven ones. So very quickly, the work of an information manager is often to put up a website and then basically to develop a response monitoring dashboard or visualizations that will help to inform the response and help decision making, right? This is usually done using infamous tools such as Excel. Yes, still today, Excel is widely used for reporting collective activities in a humanitarian context. So having said that, a lot of then further reports are being basically developed that sometimes allow a bit more granular analysis, such as this Yemen cholera response dashboard, where we can dig into more of the admin 2, admin 3 levels, and where operational analysis is seen as a real impact that the cluster can provide to the rest of the partners on the ground. So basically, information managers often have their computer that explodes. The point I wanted to make here is that we could probably free up some time for these information managers in using those AI tools better. And that's been something I've been also told by information managers and various users. I will just quickly finish by the fact that we at global level are also able to use and leverage some AI tools to basically scrap the data together around the humanitarian WASH response. But currently, we have really a lot of work to do. We do not know well what's currently happening in terms of practices. So this is really something that we need to assess better. We need to expand also on knowledge access through AI-assisted basically features and tools. that are collectively defined within defined knowledge areas, such as Olivier showed in querying specific resources, or a set of resources that has been deemed relevant by a collective, for example. There's a lot of work we need to do. We've been requested to do around translations and also making coordination more accessible to local national organizations or even local actors. Online modules is something that we're also looking at. How can we shape the learning, and how can AI use in tailoring some of the modules that we have in the best ways possible. The WhatsApp and contextual tool integrations is also something that from a more of a local perspective, we've heard that some tools could be used, could be the right conduits to basically ensure a wider usage of AI for simple processes or simple queries. Now, for us also, data analysis and frameworks is definitely something that AI tools help us with. And we're very curious to know how AI can further support operational research. So a couple of entry points that I wanted to leave here, and
I'm sorry,
finish with,
Alyosha, we're gonna need, we need to move on to the next speaker. I'm
yeah,
super
I'm
sorry.
just finished with this last quote. Apologies.
Yeah.
That was given by a coordinator, basically, who said, yeah, let's feed the machine with the machine and let us do more operational work, which is also summarizing this presentation. Sorry if I was too long. Danielle, over to you.
Thank you so much, Alyosha, for that. That was fantastic. I'm going to hand it over to our last speaker, Nicole Weber from ProWash Scale, and just to announce a project, and then we'll do one more poll and move to the Q&A. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, and really interesting conversation so far today. So I'm the WASH Technical Director for a project known as ProWash and Scale, which focuses on capacity strengthening, learning, and research. And together we are teaming up with the Global WASH Cluster and Research into Practice to create a short course on AI for WASH and water resource management. So AI is and will change how we all are working. And so our goal is to really create a space to dialogue, learn, and experiment together through using WASH and water resource management examples. So we anticipate that each session will be less than 2 hours, allowing time for you to both access information, case studies, but also have time to practice. The short course will be over about 2 months with 3 to 4 sessions. It will be online with English with French interpretation. We plan to build it in a way that if you can't join us live, you can afterwards access the recording and do some of the exercises or practical examples on your own time. So we wanted to just take this opportunity to hear from you. What do you want these skill builders or short course to focus on? You can select all of the topics that seem most relevant for you. There's lots of different ways that we can use AI, and so we wanted to narrow it down to 3 to 4 topics for this first online short course. And then the second question is, do you have AI sites, apps, or presenters to recommend for our workshops? So wanted to crowdsource here from some of you. And maybe if you're using AI already in your work for WASH and water resource management, you can also put your own name or your own email address and we'll reach out afterwards. So thank you, Danielle, for giving us the opportunity to put in a little plug.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. And I've launched an end of webinar poll right now. And that poll is up just to inform, please answer the 2 questions. That poll will stay up through the remainder of the call. And so what I wanted to do was come back. Nicole, if you can stop sharing your screen, then what I wanted to do was come back to the Q&A. And I'll start by summarizing some of the Q&A. Susan Davis wrote, "It seems like in an emergency, it would be helpful to get a quick and reliable answer. Would any of you recommend AI for use in these situations?" And someone else wrote something else that was how does an anonymous attendee wrote, "How does quality of AI generated content get cross-checked for accuracy and quality?" And both of these get at this question of how much do we believe and how much do we trust AI? And so does any of the speakers want to jump in and talk about how to cross-check the results from AI? How do we do that? don't know if anybody wants to answer that. Olivier, go for it.
Sure, that's one of the biggest challenges, I think, in building knowledge retrieval systems. I think one of my short answer is there's a huge difference between a out-of-the-box kind of using ChatGPT, Anthropic, Claude, or Copilot, and relying on its trained knowledge versus something that uses a form of information retrieval. In one case, you're talking about evaluating just the model. In another case, you're talking about evaluating the system. When you're building a system on top of a model, you're able to do a lot of cross-checking, both automatically, but as well as with experts, to evaluate the quality overall of that information pipeline. So you're getting away from the black box approach. So highly recommend looking at that. I shared a link towards a little bit about technical information on how to do that with knowledge systems versus just the model. I would never trust the model on its own, as a short answer.
Exactly. Anybody else want to jump in?
Yeah, as well. So we work at an operational level. So we try to generate guidance that's useful for field workers. Just dropping in a recommendation without testing how it actually works for anything is a bad idea. We have to implement and see how well it's working. So the AI, the ML is a tool to help us improve things and optimize things, but we still have to be doing the work of checking how it's actually faring in the field. So an addendum, not a replacement for what we need to do.
Right. Anyone else? I think one thing I found in my work with AI is that I can generate a draft, or I can do something very quickly that can replace kind of the low-level work. But I have found that I have to check that. And someone used the term with me that AI hallucinates. And it's been interesting because without that double checking, I feel like I can't trust the AI. So I can do something and maybe it takes less time, but that double checking of someone who knows still has to happen. And I think that's the hardest thing with AI when you read the answer and you know something's incorrect, but how do we roll that out? And that's kind of the biggest thing I think about in AI. Let me go through. Um, there's a question about proposal writing and AI for proposal writing. Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
Yes, if I may, Danielle.
Yeah.
So we've been in touch also with a coordinator who's been liaising with a couple of partners around the country-based pool fund allocations for local partners, and has been basically also supporting some of the local partners in writing the right proposals. Their question was, we want to make sure this is in the best language and format of the receiver of this proposal, and therefore being able to use ChatGPT, Claude, also to look at the donor strategies, uploading a certain number of documents that would basically then generate content in the language of the receiving and actually the funding organization was one of the key steps. And then to be able also to look at the style in which that would be written, which is also something that the local organization had worried it would not fit basically the humanitarian kind of system that was defined at national level. And last but not least, also those components that you have been mentioning, Daniele, like writing the right introduction around the situation of the country and then focusing on the actual region. Of course, the local organization knows better than anybody, but they would want a certain structure, and the AI tools help them to do that. So over to you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to jump in on that? Yeah, Olivier.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a huge shift because both, funders can use these tools for evaluating proposals and then users doing it itself. And we're probably going to get to a point where, AI is doing the writing and AI is doing the checking, and then the human comes in at a very, very small pace, which in some way we are democratizing access to being able to access now the complexity of proposal writing, which is fantastic. But at the same time, a lot of proposals like job interviews are going to look amazing on paper, but because it's going to be well written, but it's going to require a huge amount of verification because, it can just make stuff up and hallucinate on content. So we're going to be really careful where we're going. But I've shared a link to a few tools out there that already exist, are AI supported proposals writing.
Right. And then we have a question from Moses Daniel about what AI tools can be used for proposal development. And it is possible in the ChatGPT and equivalents to ask it to write in a certain language. So if you put in the language of the donor and ask it to be written in that language, you can use those tools to do that. Do you have any other thing to add to that, Olivier?
No, just I'll share 2 links where there's options to show you how to use tools built for that purpose as well.
Exactly. And then there's a hand raised from Salam Jafaro Seji. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. You can either type your question in the Q&A, or if you want to unmute and ask a quick question, we'd be happy to do that as well. Salam, are you there? Okay, so you can type a question if you have it in the Q&A or in the chat, and we'll answer your question live. Okay. Up. So James Brown is asking what I think is a really important question in the Q&A. If more and more of the WASH domain guidance is generated through LLMs, what is the risk over the next decade or so that the training data set used to train WASH becomes primarily artificially generated? How would this affect the diversity and quality of responses? So this is one thing, just to give everyone a background. The LLMs are trained on data. So they trained up to 2015, 2016, 2017. They got kind of smarter and smarter, as if you use that term, through, and now they go all the way to 2024. And so the question is about this: does this become recursive? Are the LLMs now training on what they produce? And does that lead to a little loop of their producing content, training on it? And I'd love, maybe Alice, Olivier, this is about the larger question I want to get to, is where is AI going, right? But Alice, Olivier, do you want to kind of address this maybe?
I would say that that can be a concern when we hear that so much of social media may be produced by bots or trolls already, and then we take that as training data for some things. We may already be in a regime where we're using machines to generate more data for machines, and there is a whole field of generating fake additional data by machines because humans aren't making enough of it. And I think there is, of course, a danger that you will reduce your touch with reality and lose the actual information. But I do think if you're selective about it, it's not necessary that it is trending bad. It could be that, for it in a simple way, if the LLM generated text has better spelling and grammar than human generated text, then spelling and grammar should improve. But can we do that for thought? I don't know.
Do others want to jump in? Yeah, Olivia.
Yeah. The term, like, it's big in the LLM space. It's called model collapse or model decay, where it's like we're kind of feeding the same data in and out. And I think from a knowledge perspective and from a bias perspective, we have huge issues around that, right? So if a model is a little bit biased towards, when you say, show me a picture of a doctor and it's a white man, it'll just keep feeding that because that's the images of what a doctor is. And so there's an issue there. So a lot of big tech is basically begging for real data, as they call it. And so like they're getting partnerships with news, with Reddit, which is a social media platform, because they need this like real data. And so I think, yes, there is an issue there, but one thing that we can do and what we're having to face is now filtering the signals from all of something that's out there. Even just for building the knowledge base behind WASH AI, we're having to now put on these filters to be like, okay, no, this is AI generated. I don't want to bring this in because we're bringing in this like recursive issue. So yeah, it's a problem and we're working on it, but it's not easy.
Right. And then this is actually, Yeah, I'd like to take this question from an anonymous attendee. Any examples of machine learning tools being deployed locally, offline in WASH and or humanitarian response? And I think there's WASH AI there, but the question is about locally or offline. And Olivia, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. So that's super interesting right now. So no one wants to work with big tech because for many reasons. So we're seeing a lot of open source models that are now getting so much better that you can actually run either in a completely private tenant, like of your own server or online, or on your computer itself if it's good enough. And that includes like transcription services. When you're going from like an audio recording to transcribing, these models are getting so much better, and there's techniques where they can kind of make them smaller and you can run them completely offline, which is going to be huge for both data privacy, but also democratizing access to these models versus relying on having a contract with Google, Microsoft, or AWS. So yes, it's moving fast and very, very exciting.
Exactly. And I want to get at something Brian Reed asked, which is about losing detail and nuance if only summaries are generated. And I think that gets at a bigger piece of what AI is, because so in this webinar, what we tried to do is give an overview of what AI is and using it for research, for information, for practice, and then giving some opportunities for training. And my takeaway from this webinar is and from the sector is AI is this incredibly powerful tool, a set of tools that we're learning how to use that need a verification step because it sometimes hallucinates, and need to think about the ethics of that and how we use that as it continues to evolve, as Olivia say, every 3 months. And so the question I would ask is, and we've talked a little bit about these risks of having decay, right, in the information over time as AI starts incorporating AI generated responses or not. So I would love to ask the panelists to kind of close out the last 5 minutes of the call. Where do you see AI going? What are the strengths and the risks? And it's hard to say. I'd normally say in like 5 years, but in 5 years it'll be very different. In the next, like, say, 6 to 12 months, even that line. Does that make sense? And I don't know who wants to start, but I want to give everyone an opportunity to talk about it. Does someone want to jump in? I know it's a big question.
I can go first. I don't know if I can comment on where it's actually going to go. I can't predict the future, and I feel very. I think we need to be aspirational about where we want to go. So maybe I'll frame it that way, to say that there's so much data out there in the humanitarian sector. So I would like to see more tools that are able to leverage that existing data, like stuff we always spend so much time and resources collecting, and unlocking what's life-preserving information inside that data, and then feeding into our operations. I want to see that loop getting tighter through new tools. So that's where I hope we can go into the future.
Anyone else want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll float a long-term concern, which is more of an ergonomic concern. The more that we use different tools, the more our skill set changes. People are a lot less good at navigating with a compass now, even in the military, because of GPS. Well, when we grew up, we had to read everything ourselves. But if you are now growing up in a way that you can get digests from AI, how does your skill set change? And are we going to be losing some important skills because of our use of tools? So I think it's helpful for us to think not just what we get from the tools, but how that changes our skill set and the skill set of the emerging scientists and leaders.
That raises a really interesting question about, like, always when you teach or you're always taught to go to primary sources, go to the primary source. What is it said? And AI really changes that concept of what is a primary source of data. Thank you for that, and how people use that. Anybody else want to jump in?
Maybe just to briefly say just the importance of, I think, AI literacy, as you noted, like what needs to be cross-checked how to find that information. You know, I think there's a lot of potential, but also the critical skills that we need to make sure we have. And particularly, I think in this environment where we're stressed to produce a lot and to respond quickly, we want to make sure not taking shortcuts to have, you know, the best available information. And then also the digital divide. So that's, you know, making sure that not just some people have that AI literacy and access to good resources, but that it's across the board.
Yeah, and thank you, Nicole, because I wanted to piggyback on that, basically around the how to make it a local reality, how to look at the contextual tools, the uses, the practices, and also going back to basic education. How can we ensure that the youth has the literacy, can spend time on debunking those tools because they will become everyday use tools, and I'm convinced about that. And I think this is where also a lot of the investment, and perhaps from our personal and professional lives, we can have in making youth a part of that.
Fantastic. I wanted to end this in our last 3 minutes. I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results. So you should be able to see what people have said here. So for the skill builder classes that Nicole and ProWash will offer with partners, it seems the largest thing people are looking for actually is conducting qualitative or quantitative data analysis. Then also designing data collection tools, proofreading, summarizing content, getting answers to technical questions, generating ideas. But then at the bottom is more privacy and ethics, and then generating communication and behavior change materials. Right. And then there's a bunch of people, I'm not going to share the results of people who recommended sites or apps or presenters. I'll get those to Nicole as part of the survey. So I'm gonna stop the sharing of the poll results. We wanted to say thank you so much for uh, for answering that poll and providing that information. With our last 2 minutes, I wanted to say thank you to our incredible group of speakers. We really did try to go from AI generally and from a computer science perspective through research, through kind of information, through use in the technical, through training, and coming to these questions. I wanted to appreciate all our speakers for being here. They were fantastic. We have a tight timeline and we made it. I also want to appreciate all of you for being here and listening and the questions. And please feel free to reach out to me or the other speakers. If you have any follow-up questions, this is a webinar series. Our next one will be announced. We'll be doing wastewater and waste effluent sampling in humanitarian context in November. And so we look back, you'll probably see emails from me about that. And thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to end the webinar now. We very much appreciate it. Okay.